There's no shortage of stories about actors getting so into a role that they've started acting a little bit funky. Perhaps they had trouble switching off from a troubling character after a shoot, maybe the disturbing material invaded their dreams, or even the shooting conditions they willfully put themselves through created tremendous anxiety for them. But whatever the reason, all of the following actors gave themselves the fear in a major way, and we're not talking about the kind you get after a night on the town. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 actors who scared themselves. Number 10, Natalie Portman worried she was, quote, going to die. Black Swan. Darren Aronofsky is one of the most uncompromising filmmakers working today, and actors who signed up to star in his movies are clearly encouraged to entrench themselves as deeply as possible in their characters. I mean, just look at Mickey Rourke in The Wrestler and Jennifer Lawrence in Mother. And then there's Aronofsky's Black Swan, which scooped Natalie Portman a Best Actress Oscar for her performance as Nina Sayers, a ballet dancer whose grasp of reality begins to slip amid fierce competition. But between the dark subject matter and intense training regime Portman underwent for the role, including losing 20 pounds and working up to 8 hours per day, she ended up becoming fearful for her own life. She said, quote, there were some nights that I thought I was literally going to die. It was the first time I understood how you could get so wrapped up in a role that it could sort of take you down, end quote. Portman later followed up by admitting that she, quote, probably should have gone into rehab, end quote, following the completion of filming, though instead she just threw herself headlong into shooting the first Thor movie. Number 9, Bill Skarsgård had vivid recurring nightmares about Pennywise, It. Much as there are many stories about Bill Skarsgård keeping a distance from his young co-stars while portraying Pennywise the dancing clown in the It movies, Skarsgård didn't only end up spooking the actors portraying the Losers Club, but his own mind also started playing tricks on him. Even once shooting wrapped on the first film, which the actor likened to an exorcism, Skarsgård was himself haunted by dreams of the monstrous child-eating shapeshifter that he portrayed. He said in an interview, quote, I was home, done with the movie, and I started having very strange and very vivid Pennywise dreams. Every night, he came and visited. It was in the shape of either me dealing with him, sort of Pennywise as a separate entity of me, and then also me as Pennywise in circumstances that I didn't appreciate. It was a process of letting go of the monster, end quote. Number 8, Michael B. Jordan needed therapy after method acting as Killmonger, Black Panther. As this list will go on to prove, it's not that uncommon for actors playing traumatic or difficult roles to seek some sort of counseling or therapy afterwards, though perhaps few would expect such measures for a superhero movie of all things. But Black Panther was no regular comic book movie, and villain Eric Killmonger was certainly no regular supervillain. Enough that actor Michael B. Jordan had to seek professional guidance to disengage from the character following the shoot. He said, quote, I went to therapy. I started talking to people, started unpacking it a little bit. I was by myself, isolating myself. I spent a lot of time alone. I figured Eric, his childhood growing up, was pretty lonely. He didn't have a lot of people he could talk to about this place called Wakanda that didn't exist. He would go on to say, though, that after the filming, he, quote, didn't have an escape plan. When it was all over, I think just being in that kind of mind state, it caught up with me, end quote. Personal toll aside, of course, Jordan delivered one of the most compelling villains and best performances in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe to date. Number 7, Bob Hoskins hallucinated animals terrorizing him. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Who Framed Roger Rabbit is one of the most innovative blockbusters ever made, and ahead of its time hybrid of live-action filming and animation, where director Robert Zemeckis employed innumerable practical tricks to convince audiences that its animated characters were indeed interacting with the real world. But Zemeckis' greatest weapon all along may have been the late great Bob Hoskins, who had the daunting task of giving the impression that he was plausibly speaking to and acting around a bevy of animated characters, years before CGI characters were a commonality in Hollywood. As a result, it's not terribly surprising that the effect had a bit of a warping effect on Hoskins' own brain, to the extent that the actor became a little bit concerned for his own mental well-being, saying in an interview, quote, I had trained myself to hallucinate, and in the very end it screwed up my brain. I would be sitting talking normally, and suddenly a weasel would creep out of the wall at me, end quote. Hoskins' doctor ultimately recommended that he take 5 months off and get himself straight, and indeed Hoskins didn't appear in any films for the next year. Number 6, Anne Hathaway was terrified by her weight loss. Les Miserables. Anne Hathaway won a well-earned Best Supporting Actress Oscar for her performance as Fantine in 2012's Les Miserables adaptation, but the immense plaudits came at quite the physical and spiritual cost. Hathaway lost a staggering 25 pounds to play the impoverished factory worker turned sex worker, subsisting primarily on a diet of dried oatmeal paste, and as you can imagine, this rather unsurprisingly took the actress to a terrifying place. She said, quote, "I had to be obsessive about it. The idea was to look near death. Looking back on the whole experience, and I don't judge it in any way, it was definitely a break with reality. When I got home, I couldn't react to the chaos of the world without being overwhelmed. It took me weeks till I felt like myself again," end quote. Number 5. Alex Wolfe suffered PTSD and disturbing flashbacks. Hereditary. Ari Aster's scintillating 2018 debut Hereditary is one of the most hauntingly unforgettable horror films of the last decade. And so it's not remotely surprising that the film also burrowed deep into the mind of at least one of its stars. Alex Wolfe portrays Peter Graham, the 16-year-old son of protagonist Annie and her husband Steve, a young man who was unwittingly central to a coven scheme to resurrect a demon king known as Paimon. However, after the release of the movie, Wolfe stated that he believes that he developed a form of PTSD from shooting the film, saying, quote, "It stuck with me while we were filming and it stuck with me well after. When I started talking about it, all of these flashes with all of this disturbing shit I went through sort of came back in a flood. It kept me up at night to where I got into a habit of emotional masochism to the point of just trying to take in every negative feeling I could draw from." End quote. He finished this up by saying, "I don't think you can go through something like this and not have some sort of PTSD afterwards." Number 4. Val Kilmer needed psychiatric assistance to separate from Jim Morrison, The Doors. Few actors have ever committed to a single role harder than Val Kilmer did to play Jim Morrison in The Doors, spending 6 months learning 50 of the group's songs, only 15 of which actually appeared in the flick. And despite the generally mixed reception to the film, Kilmer's performance was widely praised amid speculation that he might even receive a Best Actor nomination, which ultimately, sadly, he didn't. Years later though, Kilmer admitted that he had trouble disentangling himself not merely from playing such an iconic figure, but basically becoming him both before and during shooting. Kilmer wore some of Morrison's real clothes, asked to be referred to as Jim on set, and spent as long as 5 grueling days filming single musical scenes during the shoot. Ultimately, Kilmer had to seek psychiatric assistance to remove Morrison's aura from his own mind, and so it's not terribly surprising that the actor has never since committed to a role quite so aggressively. Number 3. Jamie Foxx had panic attacks after gluing his eyes shut. Rare. In the case of Jamie Foxx playing Ray Charles, a role for which he won a Best Actor Oscar, it wasn't so much that Foxx had trouble remembering where he ended and Charles began, but an aspect of the physical transformation which proved massively triggering for him. In addition to losing 30 pounds, Foxx agreed to director Taylor Hackford's suggestion to have prosthetic eyelids glued over the top of his real eyelids, effectively rendering him blind for each day's shoot. Perhaps not having fully thought through what he agreed to, Foxx ended up suffering from panic attacks for the first 2 weeks of filming as he struggled to acclimate to the claustrophobia of having no sight for 14 hours a day. Number 2. Nicolas Cage's break with reality, Face Off. There are few actors bolder and more experimental than Nicolas Cage, who has clearly relished tackling strange and ambitious roles throughout his career, perhaps none more popularly than as homicidal maniac Castor Troy, and John Travolta's Sean Archer wearing Troy's face in John Woo's Face Off. As fearless as the mad lad has proven himself over the decades though, even Cage has his limits, and pushed against the boundaries of his own fear while filming the scene where Archer as Troy is in jail and screaming at his fellow inmates. As Cage said, and trust me, just imagine that I'm saying this in his voice as it's much, much funnier, quote, "That was the scene in the jail cell where, God, it's such a trippy movie, where Sean Archer is pretending he's Castor Troy, and so it was so cubist. And I remember I was like, I'm Castor Troy, and I went on, almost like a riot, and there was a moment in there where I think I actually left my body. I got scared. Am I acting or is this real? I can see it if I look at the movie. That one moment, it's in my eyes." So yeah, Nick Cage losing sense of himself in a movie about swapped identities might just be the most Nick Cage thing in the entire world, and we all love him for it. Number 1. Lakeith Stanfield tricked himself into thinking that he really poisoned someone. Judas and the Black Messiah. Lakeith Stanfield earned a Best Supporting Actor Oscar nomination for his performance in Judas and the Black Messiah as Bill O'Neill, an FBI informant and the titular Judas who helped the authorities murder Fred Hampton, the leader of the Black Panther Party's Illinois chapter. Given the emotional intensity of the movie and playing such an intense historical figure, it is little surprise that Stanfield experienced real fear and anxiety while putting himself in the headspace of the man. Referring to one scene, he said, quote, "In the scene where I had to poison him, a lot of it didn't end up making making it to the final cut, but we shot me mixing it in Kool-Aid, and I had to go through all of those emotions. With someone like Daniel Kaluuya, who I respect as a human and an artist, as Fred Hampton, it felt like I was actually poisoning Chairman Fred Hampton. So sometimes your body thinks that's real, everything you're putting it through. It's no wonder I've been feeling so stressed out and having panic attacks, end quote. The anxiety was real enough that the actor even ended up seeking professional help after the shooting had wrapped. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think about these real life acting stories? And are there any interesting ones I missed off here? While you're down there as well, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.